I'm Charles Eshiemoghie. Now, there's a backstory to those many months of legal wrangling to try to decide who won Nigeria's hotly contested presidential election. Arise legal correspondent Godfrey Eshiemoghie has been there in court throughout that tortuous process, updating us as the dispute progressed from the Election Petitions Tribunal all the way to the Supreme Court. And Godfrey Eshiemoghie joins me now in the studio. Good to see you, Godfrey.
Good to see you, Charles.
I mean, we've been seeing you most of the time on television, standing in front of the courts and so on. So it's quite nice to have you in the studio. And congratulations on the way that you covered those proceedings so comprehensively. Yes. But take us behind the scenes of these sort of all those court proceedings, because I mean, there were lots of anecdotal happenings behind the scenes, beyond the main proceedings themselves.
Well, a whole lot. Good evening again, Charles. And of course, there's been so much behind the scenes that, of course, you wouldn't have the time to report.
Yeah.
Basically, first of all, the interaction among we, our fellow journalists, judicial correspondents, start off with that. You know, we assess the way the counsels of both sides or all sides in the cases have put forward their case. At some point we said, well, the Peter Obi's camp in particular, which of course was the most vocal during the campaigns and lead up to the presidential election, didn't quite put their case forward like they should have. At that point we could assess where the case was going, where the outcome was going to, the decision was
how it was going to end, right.
Basically. And then we could, you know, from that point, look from within our crystal ball, from our own assessment, how the whole judicial process could end, more like predicting what could likely be the end. Of course, we saw the way the Tinubu camp, the team of SAN, Senior Advocates of Nigeria, marshaled their case, most likely with the way they argued their case and dismissed the 25% FCT votes and all that, and then the issue of the forfeiture owing to alleged drug trafficking and all that. The way they argued out their case very convincingly. We as judicial correspondent, we said, well, this is looking like something like where it's heading to. We could easily assess where it was heading to.
Of course, we know that it's more difficult to challenge a case than to defend it, because I mean the onus is on the challenger to try and prove their case.
Yes, of course. We saw that playing out in the course of the argument of this petition. Of course, we faulted how the Peter Obi group, more like the team of lawyers, approached their case, as it were, in that context. And then we could, from that point, argue, or more like assess where the case was going to head at the end of the day. But then, of course, we may have been proven right in the long run. But then the Peter Obi group still feel, and they were hard done by, because the court didn't look at the case in its merit. They felt the apex court in particular decided to go towards the line of technicalities. They felt their real case, which was Tinubu didn't qualify, wasn't even qualified to be on the ballot in the first place.
Now, in that regard, is there a sense that now that the legal process is over and President Tinubu has clearly prevailed in the law courts, that there is still the court of public opinion? Because clearly the P2Bs and the rest of them, I mean, he had a lot of support. And as the previous guest was saying, if you combine the votes of the opposition, they got 63%. So, you know, there is the court of public opinion, and perhaps the president has to be careful that his presidency isn't defined by the burden of those allegations that continue to dog him, and that 63% is probably likely to continue to believe.
That will take a lot of legislative activity, if you ask me. We need to redefine our law. We need to amend our laws.
Well, I'm just talking about the court of public opinion.
Yes, of course. Court of public
opinion.
You
can't enter it. You can't legislate into someone's
sure, of course.
opinion
Court of public opinion, of course. That, of course, will definitely play up, with respect to legitimacy. The issue of legitimacy will still play up, will still come up at some point in Tinubu's administration. So what the Tinubu administration has to do now is to win the hearts and minds of the people. Basically, it has to get it right on all fronts. Look at the issue of the fuel subsidy removal and the economic crunch in the country right now. He has to win the hearts and minds of people. He has to hit the ground running. That has been his mantra. That has been his
but also electoral reforms and legal reforms and all that sort of thing.
Yes, the illegal reforms and the electoral reforms, those are in the long term. In the immediate term, what concerns Nigerians is the economic state of the country.
Their bellies.
Their bellies. Thank you so much. So if he can win the hearts and minds of the people, respect to quote-unquote stomach infrastructure and ensuring he gets the economy right, then perhaps people begin to say, what the whole noise about?
What's the big deal?
Yes, he is doing what our choice kind of would have done. So he's getting it right.
Absolutely.
So if he gets it right economically,
that's a very good point.
If he gets it right economically, he will win the hearts and minds of people, and then every other noise about who should have been president will automatically die down.
But what about you, Godfrey? I mean, are you glad it's finally over, purely from the point of view of the tedium of having to go to courts to cover the daily proceedings and sit through those ferociously long court sort of hearings and all the rest of them?
Well, it's a mixed emotion, really, because you get to meet a lot of our colleagues from far and near who come to the court to be part of the process, to cover the court cases and all that. Then that's on the one side. And on the other side, we have the media coming under constant attacks because they say we are the ones fueling media trial. We come out and misrepresent facts. What the court says isn't what we report and all that. So we constantly come under attack.
On the defensive.
Particularly during the point of the presidential election petition court stage.
Right.
The 5-member panel was very constant in hitting out at us that we don't report what happens in court. We come out in social media, we blow things out of proportion and all that. So we had to be on the defensive all of the time. So that is one negative side to the whole thing. But the fact that it's a convergence of journalists who come together to talk about the judiciary. What is wrong with our judiciary, with the electoral process? How can we get things right? So this affords us an opportunity to look at things, dispassionately, and then we rub minds in this aspect, and then we look at how best to move things forward.
Right. So. Well, I have to say congratulations. We appreciated your coverage, and we thought you did a pretty sterling job down there. Godfrey Eshiemoghie is Arise legal correspondent, and of course he was there throughout that court process leading up to the decision of the Supreme Court on Thursday. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks for having me, John.